Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Isaak Trajković, and now I will present you my paper on the topic fracture behavior of ring shape specimens made of additive manufacturing. The ultimate goal of this study is actually to monitor the fracture mechanics parameters on pipe from which it is not possible to report test specimen that meet various standards. There are several reasons. First of all, because we have thin-walled pipes which are not suitable for standard tests. Even if we take the sheet metal from which the pipes are made, we would not get a realistic picture because during production there are many steps such as bending, welding, heating, cooling, etc. All these process essentially change the mechanical characteristic of the material. So far, several setups for testing pipes with non-standard procedures have been defined. Each of these test methods simulate the loading of a damaged pipeline along the plane to the plane of crack propagation, which can be longitudinal or circumferential. Some of the proposed specimens require a relatively complex manufacturing and/or testing procedure. The research presented in this presentation is a continuation of the work of Nenad Gubeljak, Marko Rakin, Bojan Među, and others, who analyzed the application of PRM-B type specimens and ring-shaped specimens tested for bending at 3 points. In fact, the concept of the test specimens is very similar, but the method of testing is somewhat different. So on occasion, I will introduce you to what is it actually about. In short, the PRM-B specimen is a tubular ring loaded with bending, so that a modified test procedure of standard CMB specimens was applied, where the fabrication of the specimens, determination of fracture mechanics parameters, and plastic limit loads are adapted to the cylindrical geometry. Making PRM-B specimens is relatively simple, and in that way the same condition is achieved in the area in front of the crack tip as in the pipe, e.g. residual stresses, degradation of materials due to exploitation, etc. However, it can be said that the way of loading bending is not ideal for simulating the load of a pipeline. Therefore, the geometry of the ring, but loaded with tension, is considered in this study. The first step in this study and the first step in the development of this experiment, which will enable us to obtain fracture mechanics parameters from ring-shaped specimens with a crack. That was for the test specimen made with aviable additive technologies. In particular, testing of ring-shaped specimen with a groove and a crack printed on an FDM printer made of PLA material. And this is how the experiment went. The first step in performing the experiment was to model a PRNT pipe ring notched tension specimen with a groove. 3 types of samples were prepared, of which the PT model has a shorter length compared to the others, and the PD model has a larger groove compared to the other 2 types of models. The second step in this experiment was to make a test specimen with 3D printing. The type of printer is FDM and the material used is PLA. Why we are use plastic materials and why we making specimens with that production technique. Because this is the fastest way to modifying model and production new model of specimen. Okay, you can see the printing parameters on this slide. And what I would point out is the number of outlines. In a test performed on the SEMB specimens, it was proved that at the number of outlines 2, the crack propagates in the desired direction from the top of the groove. There is no possibility of delamination due to insufficient crack length applied to the test specimen. The crack was applied to the test specimen with a blade whose thickness is about 0.5 millimeters with the help of a hammer. After applying the crack to the samples, a stochastic pattern was applied with the help of matte white and matte black spray. And the specimens prepared in this way are suitable for testing. The specimens were torn on a universal machine for testing the mechanical properties of the materials. Shimatsu AGS 600 kilonewton, whose work was monitored by 2 cameras of the Aramis 2M system. For this purpose, a patented tool specially designed for tensile testing of ring-shaped specimens was used. On the right side is this tool. We call it D-block. This tool is mounted on universal testing machine. The test conditions were as follows. The speed of upper traverse was 0.5 millimeter per minute, and the recording speed was 1 image per second. In order to harmonize the values of the forces measured on universal machine for testing and the displacements measured by means of Aramis, it was necessary to control the loading of the force from the universal testing machine on every 10 stages or every 10 seconds. And in this way, we determine the harmonize of the release of both systems. After the examined samples, the following results were obtained. The values obtained on the universal testing machine are shown in the table, but I would focus on diagrams. One of the parameters for characterizing the fracture mechanics are the CMOD and CTOD, who was obtained in this case with the help of the Aramis system by giving a point-point distance command in the software. In this way, it is possible to monitor the movement of 2 points on the recorded sample during the test. The points are placed at the very beginning of the groove, as well as the very end of the crack, from which the CTOD value was obtained. In the diagram on the left side of slide, we can see dependence force on displacement and force of CMOD parameter. On the right side of slide, we can see one report image from Aramis software on which we can follow the displacement area on the recorded specimen. It is important to note that no stable ductile crack growth is observed. Therefore, for this material, the focus was on determining the value of the stress intensity factor. On these graphs, we can notice a similar trend on the force displacement diagram as on the force CMOD diagram. What we can conclude from these diagrams is that the CMOD value is about twice as small as the approximate value of the force, as in P-type specimen. Okay. And as for PT specimens, their CMOD value is close to the value of P-type specimens for a drastically lower force value. On the right side of the slide is the displacement area recorded by the Aramis system. And on all three displacement strain stage diagrams, we could see a linear increase in displacement when it comes to the distances between the points. What is also important are the displacement area diagrams that are located along the Colorade scale. In all three types of specimens, they indicated the regulatory of crack growth. On this slide, we can see a comparative dependence of the value of the J integral on the path for the PRNT and SENT models. The quasi-static load of the PRNT and SENT specimens, actually models, was simulated using FEM. In order to determine the ratio of the values of the stress intensity factor. The diagrams shows that the distribution of the ring is uneven, which is to some extent expected, having in mind the geometry of the test specimen. We are working on determining the influence of the ratio R/W, R/T, A/W on the value of the stress intensity factor in the PRNT models. Also, one of the goals is to verify the procedure of testing test specimens with one groove, which will avoid the possibility of uneven crack growth in rings with two grooves. In the following period, we will deal with the parameters of elastoplastic fracture mechanics, as well as the examination of rings cut from steel pipes. You can see that specimens and the conclusion. All three geometries of the specimen exhibited similar behavior without significant plastic deformation prior to Sudden fracture. All three types of specimens showed approximately the same behavior, but without the possibility of obtaining a crack growth cure due to the properties of the material. Crack growth and J integral will be tracked on metallic, seam and seamless pipe specimens. And the finite element analysis enables determination of the stress intensity factor, K, for a wide range of PRNT geometries, including the specimens with a single notch. Here is references, and thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, so now the paper is open for discussion. We have time. We are now a bit ahead of time, which is not bad news since we are approaching to the last two presentations. But in any case, are there any questions for Isaak? If not, I can ask Isaak what are the next steps in his research, because this is part of his PhD thesis.
Yes, the next step is to prepare metallic specimens from seamless pipes, and to test them, and with numerical simulation to determining the J integral parameter, and then we will see.
Metallic material, steel?
Yes, steel.
Okay.
Steel.
Okay. Thank you, Isaak. So once again, we are now going to the last two presentations.